Hi, everybody. I'm Stu Holden. I'm the moderator today. I work with Fox Sports and with Turner. I work on Fox with the World Cup coverage and FIFA. And today I'm hosting these wonderful gentlemen. We're going to talk about one of the hot topics in soccer in the United States right now, which is soccer-specific stadium. And I'm going to introduce the fellas to my left here. We're going to start with Bruce Miller. He's from Populous. He's a seasoned architect who has led dozens of project teams in his 30 years at Populous. 30 years. Most recently,
I started when I was 12.
Oh, he started when he's 12, yeah, okay. Most recently, Bruce managed the team for the award-winning Exploria Stadium in Orlando, just down the road, and led the design team for Allianz Field, which is going to be one of our centerpiece talking items today, which is Minnesota United's team, stadium rather, in Minnesota, and that one debuted in April of 2019. And to his left, we have Chris Wright from Minnesota United, who was the club's first chief executive. He joined in October 2017 and has been largely successful in the field in the way that, especially this season, seeing you guys in the playoffs and the launch of Allianz Field is incredible. You have 27 years of experience, Portland Timbers and the Lynx, and 13 years there as a president where he oversaw major projects, including the Target Center renovation and development of Mayo Clinic Square. To his left, we have Justin Barton, who is told me earlier, he said he makes Bruce's stadium stand up, which is a very important part, of course.
Very thankful for that.
Justin is a principal with Walter P. Moore, which is a global structural consulting firm. He leads the firm's sports community of practice focused on creative, innovative, and high-value solutions for owners, architects, and builders. Justin is a former soccer player and still a current soccer player, which is really important.
Well, not near to your level, though. Let's be clear.
We're going to pick up game later. Yeah. And then down the end, Jeff Sawerinski, who is from ME Engineers Technology, is a senior principal managing director at ME Engineers, which is a global mechanical and electrical engineering design firm. He served as a member of Major League Soccer's Venue Design Guide Committee and contributed to the FIFA technical recommendations and requirements and an industry design guide for sustainability. Jeff's developed a diverse portfolio of project experience that has over 14 soccer stadiums. Now, we were talking earlier about some of these beautiful venues, and myself, I played in Major League Soccer back in 2006 to 2010, and I remember going to Arrowhead Stadium and playing against the Kansas City Wizards at the time, and 5,000 fans in the stadium. You look around in this 90,000 seater, and I remember traveling to Rice Eccles Stadium in Salt Lake, and not having had the opportunity to play in some of these beautiful stadiums that we see today in Major League Soccer, and I was looking, back in 2010, I think there were only 7 stadiums designed before that. So you think of Columbus, you think of Toyota, you think of the one which is now, they always changed name, Dignity Sports Health Park in Los Angeles. And now looking last year in Major League Soccer, 24 teams, 17 soccer-specific stadiums, and it's really incredible to think about that. I walk in as a broadcaster, and I'm jealous because I walk through these tunnels, I go see the stadiums, and I walk out on the field before every game, and I try not to sound like an old guy at 34 years old, but I think about myself in those moments and what it would be like to play in those stadiums, and I think that brings us to the now, which is Allianz Field, one that opened in April 2019, one that I had an opportunity to call, U.S. game this past summer in the Gold Cup, and then also a game against LAFC where the atmosphere, the experience was incredible. And I just want to start it there. I mean, what goes into the design of a soccer-specific stadium, and what do you think about as far as an experience when you're designing these projects? Well,
I think today's facilities are so much different than the past, right? You mentioned Arrowhead Stadium. You were playing in a building designed for the NFL. These buildings are designed specifically for our sport, in our country, in a particular community. And so they're responsive to your fan base. And our job is to really reinforce the experience that Chris is trying to deliver to his fan base and really intensify and make that experience as good as it can be for the fans.
And Chris, for how much input, because we heard this with LAFC and with you guys as well, of the fans and their, what their voices as part of these design conversations when you're thinking about creating fan experience, viewer experience, broadcast? I mean, everything that goes into it. How much do you work with your fan base in developing that experience for them?
Yeah, and it's been an amazing sort of process for us to basically take a look at our marketplace from a very unique perspective. Obviously, we're a saturated marketplace when it comes to sports. And you want to create really a unique fan experience that basically it separates you from every other experience that is in the marketplace. So the very first thing that you've got to do is, as you sit down in design meetings with these good folks here, is bring the perspective of the fan base to the design process. And really that starts with a tremendous amount of market research. So we hired a company called CSL to do a lot of market research in terms of size of stadium, types of spaces inside of the stadium, levels of inventory in different areas. But then we had two other committees that were working in parallel with a major sort of national company who were doing a lot of the market research for us. First of all, we had our own fan groups, our supporter groups, who were basically talking about the atmosphere that they wanted to generate in a specific area of the stadium inside of the supporter section. We then had a fan advisory group, and you were talking about LAFC, Stu. I've sat through a number of their sessions where they brought in different fans for about a 3-month period of time to really articulate the different spaces and experience that they wanted in different areas of the stadium. So when you look at it, in the end, you've got a big national company doing a lot of research for you in terms of the type of inventory, the amount of inventory. Then you've got a fan advisory council that is giving you their input on many of the spaces. And then you've got the supporters who are basically giving you their input into what environment they want to be in once you've built the stadium.
And I think that's one thing that really separates soccer apart from any other sport in the United States are the supporters group. Designing a specific area for a group of fans, and they're really the megaphone and the heartbeat of the game. 90 minutes throughout the match, singing, chanting, smoke flares after goals, confetti in certain markets, but having that dedicated space and giving them a chance to get loud is not unlike anything else in other major professional sports here in the States.
And when we talk about size for these, I mean, how do you, because with the ramp up to 2026, and we saw the last two MLS Cup finals have over 70,000 fans, and those were played in NFL stadiums, one in Atlanta, which is, they've done a good job, I would say, of being able to drop a curtain and make it feel like a soccer stadium when it's not at full capacity and still have 40,000. And then Seattle Sounders, which get, they get 40,000 fans every week, and they had 72,000 for MLS Cup. I mean, does that not make you think about when you're going into these conversations, is 20,000 enough? And is 20,000 going to be enough 10 years from now?
I think that's really the biggest question in what we do in the particular market that you're doing a project in is, what does 5 years out look like? What does 10 years out look like? Because what you want to do is create an environment that is intense, it's full, you don't want to play in front of empty seats. And so you have to have kind of the magical plan of being able to respond to day one, but then have a plan for expansion over time in, say, year 10, year 5, so that as the market develops for your product, you're able to respond with the facility.
I think one of the challenges for everybody who's coming online right now is really, our process was, we more focused on day one, but try to build an infrastructure that sort of forecast where the club might go. Right now, that forecast is around about 25,000 seats inside of the stadium, and these good folks have built an infrastructure so that we can expand to 25,000 when we believe that our model is sustainable. But it was really interesting listening to Alan Rothenberg yesterday on one of the panels, and he was talking about 1994 as compared to 2026 and the growth in our game. And he basically said, what happens after 26, and we need 40, 50,000 seat stadiums. So when we bid for the franchise, we bid against obviously an NFL owner who wanted our franchise to be in an NFL stadium. But the whole premise of what we bid around was the game above all. we were putting the game at the center of really everything that we were doing. So it was all about the pitch, the atmosphere around the pitch, and deciding that 20,000 seats were where we wanted to be at this particular moment in time, but build an infrastructure whereby we could expand once we're sure that that is sustainable. According to Alan yesterday, we haven't built it big enough, because in 2026, in Minnesota, hopefully.
Be a good problem to have.
Yeah, the demand might be 40.
Tough problems.
Yeah, 40,
Fully
50,000.
prepared to design a whole set of new ones that are.
Yeah, and Jeff, I'm curious, how does technology play a part in all of this with these stadiums and making sure, again, we're talking about, capacity and being ready for that. How do you make sure with it from a technology perspective, you don't fall behind and you're ready to handle the changes?
Well, it's technology, it's all the systems, it's power, it's water, it's all the systems that go into the building, and that is unique now. When we design a stadium now, that is always a conversation. So there's always a plan for growth. Now, is it enough? That's the big debate. But technology specifically, we're always chasing. Every time we open one, the next one's the next design that we're starting. The technologies have improved. So it is a challenge, but it is the conversation. I mean, probably one of the primary focuses on MLS is that sort of that technology, that density of access to, whether it's your cell phone, whether it's apps that are whether it's part of the experience itself. I think we see that forecasting forward. You really are going to attend these games and you're going to interact with the product in a different way than you do right now, and all of that is part of the planning, and it's forefront of what we do.
Yeah, because we're competing with the 65-inch big screen TV and your den that you have your own drinks and beverages and food that it's really comfortable. So you have to continue to offer something that's better than sitting at home, and we think that comes down to people. If we can create an environment where people are at the center of it, people are at the center of the experience, that's something you can't create on TV.
I'm curious.
That's really what it comes back to.
What have you seen? What trends have you seen in the recent soccer-specific stadiums that you've designed that are starting to catch on elsewhere? So we were talking briefly about the tunnel experience and the glass wall, and bringing people inside, giving them a different type of access, and the standing wall now. And every stadium, even some of the old stadiums, are going back and implementing these standing section only, and it really provides that noise, that atmosphere that you're talking about. I'm just curious what trends you're seeing.
Well, so we're a global practice, and we get together a lot and talk about these things. Soccer is a unique sport for us, and a piece of our practice that everybody can relate to around the globe. And so, in our practice, we're creating a very MLS-specific, American-focused soccer experience. It's very different than the EPL. It's very different than what they do in China and in the Asia-Pacific region. One of the examples is the Tunnel Club you mentioned. We first had that idea. It really, in this country, came out of baseball projects where we created the kind of diamond club behind home plate. That grew into football. It grew into arenas, courtside seats, and things like that. So we did it at Sporting Kansas City, and our respectful English counterparts told us it would never work because that's not how you view soccer. Soccer is viewed from on high, and you're looking at the game more in a plan view. And you were like, yeah, it'll work here. Well, guess what? Man City, they did a tunnel club. Our new Tottenham Stadium in London has a tunnel club. So we learn from each other, and they'd never admit it, of course. But,
right, is it, Chris?
We're pulling stuff from the English game. We're pulling stuff from the Asia-Pacific game. So it's really a great kind of incubator of ideas to try to bring the best ideas to the American game for us.
I would peel it back a little bit, and sort of our process was a little bit unique and a little bit different. And I think with so many expansion teams coming in now to our league that are going to build soccer-specific stadiums, and if our brethren are out there today, I would say start with your purpose, start with your why.
See Sacramento over here. So.
Gunther, one of my favorite human beings in the world. I think you've got to start with your why and your purpose and what is the essence of your club. And I think it's one thing to sell soccer, it's one thing to sell the MLS, it's one thing to sell Minnesota United, but what's your purpose, and what's your purpose purpose inside of the community. And this is the dirty little secret of the Scandinavian Minnesota, but we actually have 251 languages spoken in our marketplace. So we decided our why. Simon Sinek says, start with why. Our why is to inspire and unite our community through the beautiful game, through soccer, through the world's game. And these 251 languages that are going to descend on MNUFC and make it their home. And all of these people are first, second, third generation people from around the world. They've come from somewhere, they support their national team, they have a favorite club team. But what is it about Minnesota United? What is it about that stadium? What is it about that experience that basically you've got to build for them that makes it the most comfortable, diverse, friendly place for them to go and be part of their game? And so what we're trying to do in Minnesota is look at every segment of our crowd, look at the diverse community that we have, and bring some level of that experience to life inside of our stadium on a game-by-game basis. And that's why we have 20,000 people per game, and we have 6,000 people on a wait list. We've been able to achieve that in a short period of time.
I'm also curious, because these guys up here aren't cheap, I'm sure. As part of putting together this stadium, what is the return on investment, you would say? Because I think, you think of some of these old clubs that were leasing stadiums, and you now are able to control the entire experience, the concessions, the marketing that goes around that. Would you say, how important has that been for your club as far as impacting your bottom line?
It's definitely very, very important. The one thing that I struggle with inside of the MLS is that there aren't two business models that are alike. I mean, we're a privately funded $250 million stadium with a $100 million expansion fee, so we have $350 million into this game. We're carrying debt, so you have a difficult P&L that you've got to work through, every single day. Having said all of that, the very, very first decision that we made once these guys had built this beautiful thing called Allianz Field was that we were going to control the experience by managing the facility. So we didn't go to any of the bigs that we all know out there. We didn't go to SMG, we didn't go to Aramark, we didn't go to AEG. We said, okay, we're going to build a staff that basically will manage the experience. So every single part-time member of staff that works our games, we're the loons, by the way, are called we're called lunatics. And so, our day-by-day staff who manage our experience, and they're trained, basically, they have a job description, and then they have, basically, how do our fans act in the area where you work? Be part of them. And so, attitude with gratitude, gratitude with attitude is our theme, but everybody's a lunatic on game day, and if you're working in the supporter section, you're expected to behave like a supporter. And so you've got to control that experience. So ROI, return on investment, you can do it providing you are managing the experience for every person who is walking into the stadium.
And I think from the fan perspective, we designed this stadium. You guys set a great vision for what you wanted this stadium to be, tapping into that international culture that is in Minnesota. But I remember in opening day, the TIFO was, the team flies home at last, that the fans finally had a place they could plant their flag and say, this is us, this is ours, and we know we're going to be here, and it's designed around us, like Bruce was saying, designed around people, and being able to create that experience that you can't get anywhere else. You can't get in front of your house, in your den, by yourself. It gives them a place to call home and rally around.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, what type of technologies do you foresee are going to impact stadium design going forward?
Yeah. Well, certainly when technology is specific, it's density of coverage, it's bandwidth, and we have lots of conversations about what applications might come to a stadium, but really our job is to build those So let's talk about wireless stuff. Everyone wants to talk about wireless, right? So Minnesota United at Allianz, we have a dense Wi-Fi system coverage in the bowl, and that technology that supports is going to change, and we have to be able to adapt to that. And we joke sometimes because a lot of that stuff we're usually designing a stadium, and it's a forefront of some piece of technology. In this case, we're talking wireless access points or antennas, right? And we laugh sometimes, sweat architecture. We got to get in there and find places to put all these components that maybe on day one Every manufacturer of that component is doing it differently. And we've got to find ways to put this stuff into the stadium without it looking like a disaster, right? But we're in Allianz, we've got stuff under seats and handrails and guardrails, and thankfully with soccer stadiums we have canopies, which is somewhat unique to our sport, and that has allowed us to do some things that we can't do other places.
I'm going to share our internal motto with Jeff's piece of work. I said, I don't want to see your shit.
I said, yes, sir.
That's why it's underneath seats.
Right.
I think we don't, at the end of the day, we don't want technology to be a distraction. It's got to enhance the experience. Again, it's about people.
And I guess the roof is an interesting subject because, I think many people, when they looked at Allianz Field, you're in Minnesota, you talked about the Scandinavian, you have a Scandinavian climate at times as well. It's below freezing. And I think the initial conversation appears that why don't you have it entirely covered and have it as a dome? And then now we're talking about the other challenges, maybe Nashville with some of the heat and having to have a roof, and Austin FC, of course, coming in 2 years. I mean, what was the decision, at least with Minnesota, between all of you, of saying, okay, this needs to be open air, this needs to be enclosed, we're going to do the light LED around it and make it look great and have I think you have the heating under the field, is that correct as well?
Yeah. Well, I'd say it's authentic, right? We created a design story about the building that it was of Minnesota, and our whole aesthetic is generated from that. And so, I think that authentic experience in Minnesota embraces the weather. You wouldn't believe it, but people ride bicycles all year long. I was working on Target Field. I was literally bundled in my parka, walking to the job site. It was minus 28 degrees, and the wind chill was about minus 50. Yeah. And I saw a guy riding his bike to work. I'm like, okay.
And then I waved to Bruce.
This is a different place. It's part of the culture in Minnesota. I think it'd be sort of fake, honestly, to have a domed stadium to play on turf.
And I think with what we did, we looked at it in many, many different ways, and I give our ownership group all the credit in the world for approving the design and wanting to do something authentic, but also iconic. And, we wanted something that basically elevated our brand, scaled our brand, something that people would go to as a point of destination other than the 17 home games that we play. So, some of the images that we've just shown, blue is our color, obviously, and that's generally the color that we show with our LED lighting. But on Prince's birthday, we can go to purple, beautiful suit today, Stu, etc. Beautifully coordinated for a 34-year-old as well. We on St. Patrick's Day can go green, and then when we win games, we actually go to Northern Lights. And that tradition is now developing, whereby everybody in our market now understands that the Loons won a game if Northern Lights are showing, on the stadium. So there are different unique things that we can do that in the end up on social media. It scales our brand. It's, retweeted all over the place, liked, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and going back to kind of the climate issue, that was one of the really challenges with the exterior building skin, was that we needed something that would be weather tight, that would protect fans, in those early February, March games, or, late playoff games. But, the ownership group didn't want just a blanket around there. They wanted to be able to see that energy from inside the pitch generated outside, and then as fans are, we're right on the interstate, we're right on the light rail line. As fans, millions or thousands of people are going by on a daily basis, to be able to, have a venue that seems alive even if there's nothing going on. And so working with a new manufacturer developed a new material that was a woven fiberglass that was also laminated, so it would reflect sunlight, you see different images depending upon where you're at. And then at night, with the variable LED lighting, you can do, like Chris was saying, a myriad of different colors. I love, when the U.S. women's or men's national team was there, they had the red, white, and blue chasing around the stadium throughout the night before and the day of the game.
Yeah, and that was really unique for us as well. And you speak to building and designing a stadium for that local community. I mean, that's not something that you picked off a shelf. We built mock-ups, and we did, we studied stuff, we rendered things, and we really tried to find that, working with Justin's team on the skin there, to find that integrated solution that lets you do all all the tricks with the lighting system. So that was very unique.
Yeah, and we're going to open it up to Q&A, I think, after this, if anybody has any questions. I'm curious, though, because amongst all these different designs you've done, what are some of the lessons, most important lessons that you've learned after the fact that impacts the designs you do going forward? Because you're currently working on Nashville as well, and things that you learned from Allianz Field. Because Chris, you asked me earlier, you said, I've been to your stadium a number of times. I haven't had the full fan experience, but I'm trying to think of what you could have done better. And off the top of my head, I was struggling, because it's such a beautiful stadium when you think of soccer-specific ones. I mean, LAFC and Banc of California and Allianz Field right now, to me, are the two marquee pieces.
I want to hear your answer. He's the ultimate judge, right?
Yeah, there are a lot of things, and obviously I came into this process very late in the design process. So my job as an operator is to really try and figure out whether or not this thing can operate. And to be very honest with you, with the guys on the stage here, it's operated beautifully. It really has, and it makes it all worthwhile when you can get people into your stadium, out of the stadium. We have a great sort of parking, transportation infrastructure around the stadium, so all of the ingress egress situations that many stadiums have, not an issue. Food story, absolutely incredible. Talking to DNC, we were the third highest stadium in the country last year that DNC manages from a per capita standpoint, not necessarily a gross standpoint. So the concessions,
not in soccer.
How much is that? Is the beer hall?
That's across the country. That's across all sports.
Across all sports.
So when stadiums are performing that way, then obviously you've done something very well. A couple of things that I would do differently. We have this massive destination called a brew hall, which is 96 taps. It's all local beers, black and brew. None of the traditional beers are in there whatsoever. It has become the destination inside of our stadium. We can host 250 people there. That should be 500 people. And if we missed on something, it was really understanding the demand for unique spaces inside of the game, before the game and after the game.
The demand for good beer.
Yeah, the demand curve is just absolute. We have people racing to that space as gates open to get their table because they know it's going to be full. So these are all great lessons for us after the event. The only other thing that I would do as well is, having hosted actually the national team games, our press area is too small. For big events, you've got to understand, when you're building out an infrastructure, if it's just local events, then it's one thing. But immediately that your appetite grows and you're looking to bring in major national events, then you've got to double down. And you've got to have a space that is adaptable to be able to accommodate people like yourself, Stu, for national team games.
Yeah. So from my perspective, I think, we're always going to make someone unhappy in the decision we make, and trying to prioritize, all of the things you hear in the process. I'd agree with Chris. The brew hall, we thought it was going to be really great. It's kind of open to everyone, every person's club. I think we didn't know how great it would be. And we still have some alternates that we can, enact to make some of the operable glass on the backside work and things like that. So, I think it's just making sure that we're all aligned in those priorities, because, at the end of the day, I've never had a project with too much time or too much money. And at a certain point, you have to make decisions, and you're just hoping that you get the most important decisions made. So I think from my learning in the process is just make sure you have a great communication line with your whole team, the client team, the fans, the supporters, all of our internal design team. You've got to have great communication. And at the end of the day, that's the built work, is a piece of communication amongst people.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, we're engineers, so it's much less dreamy like that. Our lessons are real technical. I mean, honestly, the first MLS stadiums we used to do, we were, kind of adapting the thought process of college football, or, a scaled down NFL stadium, and we really had to learn what an MLS stadium is and how it operates, and we designed things very unique. One of our one of my best examples, I think, that makes the most sense is our sports lighting systems. You know, you mentioned Sporting KC design, and back when we were working on that job, MLS, we had the venue design guideline committee, and FIFA had lighting requirements that were implemented at World Cups, and we were trying to bring that philosophy into MLS, and you know, NFL has that, NHL has that, NBA has that, and we were trying to do the same thing because the broadcast of the game is so important for the product to be successful. And with what is really unique about all the MLS stadiums is the canopies and what that does. So we have engineers. These are real exciting people. Their whole life is, you know, specifying lights up on a rack and aiming them right way. But that's a real science. And we've learned things about, you know, glare problems because canopies are low, and you know, the guidelines are very clear on where lights can be mounted and where they can't be, and that's all lessons that we've learned as we've progressed, and technologies are advancing, and there's some great manufacturers that are helping us by building the product a certain way because of what we've learned. So that's one example.
Justin, anything?
I think it's just the continual lesson, a little bit tapping on what Bruce was saying, was just the collaboration aspect of getting alignment early and being able to make those key decisions and drivers early on a project, getting your budget and your scope, and what are those key drivers? You know, what is it, a supporters section? Is it a canopy? Everybody loves the canopy. I mean, look right behind us, it's a perfect example, right? The cover image here is a canopy. It's really hard to justify. That doesn't get a return on investment like an added club space, or if you added, you know, another 200 or 2,000 square feet to the brew hall, you could say, okay, now we're going to be able to sell X number of product. Where really a canopy, it creates your environment. That, you know, again, going back to fans being at home, nobody wants to come out and sit in the Minnesota cold or the Miami sun for, you know, 2.5 hours to watch a match. So being able to do that and as most cost effective as we can, studying different options and acquiescing to what is the right size for each individual project.
That's probably a good point, is just the MLS season itself, you know, makes these stadiums unique.
Well, let's open it up to any Q&A if anybody out there has. If not, I have about 50 more questions for these guys. But I think we got one over here. We got a microphone.
Hello. Hello, good morning. What can you tell us about, I don't know if it's the correct term, but this green architecture, these sustainable venues that are, you know, taking this next level. If you were planning, when you were designing this stadium, to use one of those materials, technologies, I don't know if it's the correct term, but I don't know what you can tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of the story that we haven't really touched on, but sustainability was really at the heart of what we did on this project and really in the heart of our practice. But, you know, Jeff, his team really worked on a stormwater management system where we recycle a lot of the collected waters. Water is abundant in Minnesota, but the reason it's such a great public amenity and part of the identity of the place is that they manage water. They make sure that their water is clean, that it's you know, controlled in a manner that is sustainable on a long-term basis.
Yeah, and I think people talk sustainability, and really you have to think of that. I mean, a stadium is you know, consumes resources at a peak level, but infrequently, right? So we really have to make decisions on its resource management. It's, you know, we can talk about low flow plumbing fixtures and things like that, but you'll use much more water on irrigation. So if you really want to make a difference, you target those systems, and that's some of the recapture that Bruce is talking about. And honestly, sometimes when we talk about sustainability, we jump to energy consumption and water consumption and things like that, and we certainly pay attention to those things at a microscopic level, but sustainability is bigger than that. It's the materials we use to build with. It's the site we put the building on. I mean, speak to that a little bit, Bruce.
Yeah, I think that's the most sustainable decision you can make on your project is where are you going to put the building? Are you going to put it out on a piece of green property, out away from people, where you consume carbon and spend a lot of energy running infrastructure to it, or are you going to pick a site that maybe has had a previous life that's near transit? Chris told us earlier, what's your percentage of people?
Almost 40% of our fan base now uses either light rail, green line buses, or bikes to come to our games. So when you think about it, 60% then are parking, but as we get into sort of the public infrastructures that have been laid in around our stadium, then more and more the parking needs are going down, while public transportation, light rail, buses, bikes, are being utilized. And it goes to fan base, and from my point of view as the CEO of our club, for those of you that are building stadiums or renovating stadiums, and you have a growing fan base which is essentially millennial, so if you're looking at that 18 to 35-year-old fan base, they need to hear a story from you. They will demand a story from you around sustainability. And you better have that story. So whether it's on waste, whether it's water, or the 1,001 things that we are involved with on a day-to-day basis, it's really important as you nurture your fan base, because the young millennials that are your fans today, they are into sustainability in a very, very big way. So you better have a narrative around that.
And part of that narrative then goes to, we talked carbon, and that's like Jeff and his teams have done phenomenal jobs at making buildings and mechanical systems more efficient. And Chris and his teams have done phenomenal jobs on game day operations in terms of, having recycling at the facility, less packaging as things are coming in. And Bruce and their teams from site selection and architectural wall systems so that you have continuous thermal insulation all the way around. The next piece, or the last piece, is what we refer to as embodied carbon. The Green Build Conference, which is the big sustainability conference, happened earlier this week, and there was big announcements on embodied carbon, which is basically all the energy and carbon it takes to build the building, producing the glass, producing the concrete, shipping all those materials to the site, and then physically erecting them. It used to be that was a very small percentage of the overall carbon impact of a building. It was maybe 2 to 5%. But now, because of all the efficiencies elsewhere, the carbon, embodied carbon, is now close to 10 or 15%. And so what can we do from a structural standpoint and materials, whether that be wood or recycled concrete and fly ash, and doing different things from a materials side to reduce that overall carbon impact. And as Jeff said, additionally, these venues don't operate every day like a hospital or a library or a convention hall. So being able to, that embodied carbon is even a higher percentage on a stadium design. So looking at ways to dramatically reduce that over the next 15 years in stadium design.
Yeah. The last point of that on sustainability, we haven't talked about it a ton, but the location of the stadium is on a major flyway for songbirds. And so literally we worked with the Audubon Society to make sure that the building didn't impact, at night with all the lighting we've done, that we weren't impacting a whole population of species that, there are other buildings like office buildings, glass, that, kill thousands of birds every year. So even down to that detail of the building and the thought that went into creating the iconic structure that we did.
I think we've got time for, we got another one over here. Yeah.
Hey, good morning. I think this one's more for Chris. I just wanted to ask about the importance of local flavors in building club attachment with your community, and bringing local beers and local restaurants to to the stadium. And how do you balance that with corporate partnerships and the challenge of some sponsors and whether you charge or you don't charge for these people to come in, or how does that work in your building? Thank you.
So it starts really with how in essence are you going to build your club? So if you really do build your club around a purpose, and then you build your club around research, and you're researching your fan base all of the time to really understand what their needs are, to make them in some way, shape, or form have a really holistic experience inside of your stadium. Obviously, we went deep into the F&B world. Right now, research would tell you that food and beverage is the second reason why people go to games. It is the game itself, it's the beautiful game, but after that, food used to be something that you would have at a game. Now it's a reason that you would go to the game, so it's a massive piece of your experience. On the F&B side, Let's start with food. We took a look at the diverse nature of our fan base, and then we decided that the portables that we have ringing our concourses basically are all ethnic foods. And so we went deep into the communities that are supporting us to make sure that our portables, working with DNC, our food and beverage provider, basically have all of the diverse foods that we need inside of our stadium so that our fans are welcome to have that experience as they come in. From a beer standpoint, we did a number of surveys, and I look at John Guiano over here, our SVP of marketing. We went deep into trying to understand what people were going to consume from a beverage standpoint inside of our stadium. The traditional beers, the one that showed up the highest on our surveys was at number 7. Everything else was craft. And so we came with a theory that a Black and Brew campaign, we went out to local craft beers, knowing that the MLS would look at the total yield of that category in terms of corporate partnerships, and said, how can we build to that, going to all of the craft beers in town and putting them inside of our stadium. And so it's complicated. We didn't quite get to the yield that I would have liked by not taking a big check from one of the big companies that are in this country. But we got very, very close by going to a lot of different craft beer providers inside of our own market and bringing them into the stadium. So it's this holistic fan experience that we're trying to build, for every single fan based on research, that they're giving us.
Right. Well, I think we're about right at our timer. We have 45 seconds left, apparently. So unless anyone has a really quick question, we got one over here quickly.
Yes, J.B. Belzer, CEO of Hilo Goal. In design of modern stadia, is there demand in the fan zone activation and experience for mini pitches and places to play 3-a-side, 4 or 5-a-side before or after the match?
From my perspective, absolutely.
I'd go there as a broadcaster, yeah.
Well, would you take your daughter there?
Activity, I think it'd be fantastic.
We need medical facilities.
I would love to think.
Wow.
Obviously, it's all about the business model in the end and where you place all of your resources. We actually built something on the outside of the stadium called the Great Lawn. It's an activation space on a game day, so we can do everything from coaching clinics out there, 3v3 tournaments, 5v5 tournaments, on the Great Lawn that is right outside of the stadium. Doesn't go to infrastructure so much, but obviously we're huge into growing the youth game, particularly inside of our market, but then it obviously goes back to resources.
Great. Well, I just want to say thanks to Bruce, Chris, Justin, and Jeff for their time, and keep up the fantastic work. I think we have Nashville coming, Miami, Austin, Sacramento, St. Louis, of course. So a number of soccer-specific stadiums will be coming to the United States, which is it's incredible. I mean, to see the growth and the explosion. And thank you to everybody here for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.